Did that, his business grew. And as he practiced the golden rule, relationship by relationship, transaction by transaction by transaction, and treated people well, what he found was that conversations were being had about him and about his products when he wasn't there. Next thing, word of mouth started. And we know today that African Americans are the most viral people on planet Earth. Well, the virality was starting about his products, and it reached a point where he could barely keep up with his business. And so he was trying to solve problems and treat people well as he solved them and love people.
I'm curious what Mr. Johnson thinks about today, the hair discrimination, black hair, the natural movement. You know, did he talk a little bit about that? Is he seeing similar?
Hair discrimination today, I'm not sure we talk so much about that. However, Mr. Johnson believes that people should be able to wear their hair the natural way God made it and it springs out of our hair, or to alter it for whatever reasons we want to, not because the world requires it of us. So he has very strong feelings about that. And so his first product, he mentioned, were relaxers, the Ultra Sheen brands. But with the mid-1960s comes the Black is Beautiful movement, and Dr. King used to say you should wear your hair as naturally as it comes out of your head, and you should be as proud of it as it naturally comes out of your head. And so Afro Sheen developed from that. He tells a funny story very early on. So the film opens with him saying that Dr. King came to his manufacturing facility. What he doesn't say, I don't think, was that it was brand new. So Dr. King is like looking around at this 30,000 square foot facility, state of the art, everything. Black people working from the factory floor all the way through the C-suite. Women. Okay, so let me say, this was a time when in 1970, only 5% of black people had professional jobs. So in 1970, so 95% of us were working in more subservient roles. We were domestics, we were cooks, we were janitors, we were cleaners, trying to access the mainstream workforce. So tell me the question again, please. I know, I'm
No, you got it. It's okay. I think you answered it.
Okay, did I? Okay.
I wanted to talk about Dr. King because I mean that was a big part of the book.
Yes. Oh, that's what I was. Can I just tell you?
Yes.
Yes. And maybe this is where you're going. So there's a very interesting scene when Dr. King comes to the plant and he asks Mr. Johnson to help him. And he asked Mr. Johnson to help him found what would become Operation Breadbasket in JPC's company cafeteria. So Operation Breadbasket was a movement where black entrepreneurs and manufacturers placed pressure on retailers to carry their products. They did it through picketing out in front of the retailers, through boycotts, and through openly applying pressure in the media. So he started, they had a meeting in JPC's cafeteria, and Mr. Johnson had to laugh because at that time, Martin Luther King was saying, wear your hair natural, and Mr. Johnson was selling relaxers. So he had to laugh at the irony that this man was undermining his business. But one of the amazing things Mr. Johnson did was help black businessmen in Chicago, a bank in Chicago actually come together and make a $1.2 million loan to the Southern Christian Leadership Conference to help them do voter registration campaigns down south and to integrate, at that point in time, it was the Jim Crow North. So there was segregation in housing. My father was a housing person. Segregation in housing, segregation in the workforce, and segregation in education, which we're still struggling with today.
He also talks about meeting Reverend Jesse Jackson. Can you share like his recollections about that too, without spoiling the book for everybody?
So, Mr. Johnson and his wife were walking across the campus of the University of Chicago Seminary. And as he was walking across campus, he could hear from one of the chapels, clearly an African-American voice, preaching. And what little he could hear sounded interesting. And so he and his wife went into the chapel and they stood in the back, and he's listening to this young man who maybe he was 24. I'm not sure if he was that old. He was 20. Let's say he was 24, something like that. And he asked the people next, "Who is this man?" "Oh, that's Reverend Jesse Jackson." And so Jesse Jackson was at Chicago Seminary, learning his craft, learning his trade. So Mr. Johnson met him early, could tell his brilliance, and so he pulled together a group of accomplished black men, most of whom were entrepreneurs, and they took Reverend Jackson under his wing. And so Reverend Jackson thought of Mr. Johnson as a father figure for the work that he did in Chicago.
In the trailer, we saw some of the ads. Talk a little bit about the Soul Train and what you thought about Don Cornelius and the color TV ads that he purchased, and to advertise his products.
Yes. Okay. So today we're used to seeing black images in magazines, on television, the commercials in the movies. We're used to seeing black images, and we're used to seeing positive black images, but that was not always the case. You remember, right? Mm-hmm. And so when Mr. Johnson in the late 1950s, when he started advertising, a lot of the advertisements that had black people in it had black people in as servants. So many of us grew up with Aunt Jemima pancakes, right? We grew up with Uncle Ben Rice until very recently. I saw on social media the other day, there are people trying to bring back Aunt Jemima, right? So the images of black people in the media were black people in servile roles and roles that diminished us. And so Mr. Johnson, along with two great advertising geniuses out of Chicago, one of them is Tom Burrell, and I'm going to think of the other gentleman's name. I'll think of it in a second. One of them created print advertisements with black people, and so he used to say, black people are not, it's something like black people are not brown white people. So he began to show black people in a cultural context and positive imagery. So I learned at a book signing in Chicago 2 weeks ago, I did not know this didn't come up in our conversations. The first television ads with black people in them were Mr. Johnson's ads, which I was not aware of. And so Mr. Johnson, as part of his golden rule, it was very important to him to always show us in a positive light and in a realistic light, show us as human beings, show us as we are, but also to show us in a very forward-thinking way. So many of the advertisements had black people doing things that we could not get hired doing yet. So as I was watching back through the advertisements, I saw a black woman figure skater. So it made me wonder, did I, as a young child, develop an interest in figure skating because I saw that Johnson Products ad? I can't remember if it was Ultra Sheen or an Afro Sheen ad. I figure skated as a little girl. Did that ad influence me? So he had black figure skaters. Here I am, a writer. He had black authors. He had black journalists, right? He had black flight attendants. There were no black flight attendants. And so he was very visionary and forward thinking, projecting into popular culture, but also projecting into our consciousness. We are able to do these things that we can push to be able to push the culture, push society, push the laws so that we are able to work in these jobs and have these types of careers.
Thank you. So the book is out now.